Today's scripture is Luke 2, verses 41 through 52. Now every year his parents went to Jerusalem for the festival of the Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up as usual for the festival. When the festival was ended and they started to return, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but his parents did not know it. Assuming that he was in the group of travelers, they went a day's journey. Then they started to look for him among the relatives and friends. And when they did not find him, they returned to Jerusalem to search for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. And all who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. When his parents saw him, they were astonished. And his mother said to him, "Child, why have you treated us like this? Look, your father and I have been searching for you in great anxiety." He said to them, "Why were you searching for me? Did you not know that I must be in my father's house?" But they did not understand what he said to them. Then he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was obedient to them. His mother treasured all of these things in her heart. And Jesus increased in wisdom and in years and in divine and human favor. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Today's scripture is a famous one in Jesus' family. It's the story that is brought up around the dinner table, and they're all like laughing and reminiscing at all these funny memories, and usually it's memories of these close calls when something could have gone horribly wrong, but instead it turned into a story that they all laugh about in the present moment. Every family, I think, has one of these stories. And these stories, they often have their origin in some sort of miscommunication or human error of some kind. And almost every single one of these stories is funny when they retell it years later, but in the moment, it's very scary and confusing. It's the classic child gets left behind at a big event story. Perhaps your family has one of these. I have one. I am one of 6 children. Often my poor mother and father would lose one of us at a store, or I would wander off, and then they couldn't find me. My favorite story is when my family left me at a Dairy Queen in rural West Virginia. I'd gone to the bathroom, and I came out, and they were gone, and the door was locked to the store because it was closed. And these Dairy Queen employees were kind of just looking at me, wondering what to do with a 10-year-old. And I was dreaming of like spending the night with like chicken nuggets, ice cream, soft serve, but I also really wanted my family to come back. And I sat in that booth for about 10 minutes, and then my family station wagon pulled into the parking lot. My dad was super apologetic, and everything was fine after that, and it turned into a funny story. But the one thing I did not say to my dad when I saw him was, "Why were you worried about me, Dad? Didn't you know that I was at the dessert house known as Dairy Queen? Why were you searching for me, Dad?" I didn't respond that way because I was so happy that they came back for me. In our story for today, Jesus gives an unusual response to his mother, who has been worried sick about him for 3 days. And it's the kind of response that would probably get me slapped or in timeout, or definitely not on good terms with my parents. It's an interesting look into Jesus as a teenager. I am not a mom myself, but I have a feeling that this is a story that comforts a lot of parents everywhere in those moments with their teenagers that are full of tension. Like, okay, if Jesus Christ himself was this sassy and flippant, then it's okay if my teenager is as well. I'm also in awe of Mary in this moment. Our text tells us that his parents were confused at what he said, and being the parents of God must not have been easy. And I'm sure there were plenty of other moments like these where Jesus' response may have come off as rude in the context of being fully human, but as the Son of God, they come off as full of wisdom and all-knowing. I think about Joseph and how he must have felt, knowing that he wasn't Jesus' real dad, and that Jesus is getting to the point in his life where he brings it up a lot. And Mary and Joseph are just trying to be the best human parents they can be to Emmanuel, God among us, who has just shown them that he is growing up. He doesn't need them as much anymore. I mean, I've said this before, but I really think God chose the absolute best couple to handle raising God in the flesh. A mom and dad who may have been confused by their son, but then in the moment they also can remember that his perspective is drastically different from theirs. In moments like these, they totally could have lost their temper. I would have lost mine, or assumed Jesus was being spiteful or whatever. But instead, they take a second, take a pause. They try to understand what Jesus is saying. One of the devotionals for Advent from Illustrated Ministries talks about this phrase, "Get curious, not furious." And it's a reminder to pause in moments of tension and misunderstanding, be curious, and try to understand the other person. I think it's very useful advice, not just for parents, but every person who deals with someone that they do not understand. For parents, it may be trying to be curious as to why their child made a mess, didn't listen to them, didn't do their chores, instead of furious. And in this passage for today, we see curious instead of furious on display. We see this slowing down of adults, and we see a social reversal. Throughout Jesus' ministry, there is often a reversal of things. Time and time again, Jesus turns expectations and norms on their head. And this time, we have a reversal of the relationship between children and adults. We see Mary and Joseph assume that their child is helpless, kind of wandering around Jerusalem looking for his parents. Totally normal thing to think, by the way. But in actuality, he was completely calm and was fine. We see these teachers and rabbis surprised by Jesus' insight. Apparently, not a lot of 12-year-olds were super eloquent in theology. But perhaps, maybe, this was the first time that these teachers and rabbis had slowed down enough to take a child seriously. So often in our world, our young people are not treated as the same as adults. It's not super problematic, I guess, because children do need more care and attention as they grow up. They don't have as much life experience, but often we adults don't think we have the time to slow down and really listen to children, perhaps because we have this prejudice that they aren't as wise. I have personally dealt with this judgment many, many times. Growing up, I was never asked by a pastor or a church leader about my thoughts on theology. It was actually Sunday school teachers, these wonderful people who saw the brilliance and spark in each and every child, who believed in them and took them seriously, took the time to get to know me and ask my thoughts on God and Bible stories. Countless times, I have been judged because of my age, especially in my profession. You know, I cut my hair short just so I would look older. I don't know if it worked, but I am so grateful to work in a congregation like Calvary who supports 3 young female ministers. They don't even bat an eye. I cannot tell you how rare this is in the Baptist world. One of the reasons I loved Calvary in my interview process was that they included a student, Stefan, in my search committee. And when we celebrate communion together, everyone is invited to take the elements, young and old. I worked in children's ministry for 3 years. And let me tell you, children are absolutely brilliant. Students are brilliant. They have this wonderful way about them of simplifying life's complexities, reminding you what's really important, noticing when Bible stories are really messed up, and being absolutely hilarious. They aren't afraid to call you out when you're wrong. They show you what true joy looks like and how to dance when nobody's watching, how to be silly, and we should never, ever underestimate them. You know, there are far, far worse prejudices in the world, but it was a trend in Jesus' time, and it's certainly a trend now. We adults are just sometimes terrible at knowing when to slow down, be quiet, and listen, especially to those who are younger than us. In this story, we have 2 examples of adults who experience this reversal, and they do it well. We see Mary and Joseph patiently trying to understand their son, somehow not losing their temper, although I think that part was taken out in the post-editing process later. And we see these rabbis and teachers who are taking the time to listen to this 12-year-old boy. We're not sure how Jesus started talking to these rabbis, whether he went up to them or if they overheard him speaking with great theological insight. But it showed these adults' willingness to stop, listen, and learn. How much have you missed because you were too rushed to slow down and listen, or too impatient to see someone's brilliance and spark? Who have you underestimated or judged without realizing it? I have experienced that judgment, but I'm also preaching to myself here, and there have been plenty of moments where I've had to catch myself in my judgments. I ask myself, are there moments when I'm just trying to rush through life and not pay attention to the brilliant theologian, the young, the old, in between, who are right in front of me? All around us in this world, it's a culture of impatience and appearances. And Jesus lived in that culture as well. And we have to continually remind ourselves that the world is so focused on getting things done as quickly as possible, focused on appearances. We have to remember that we don't have to be that way. We're called to a different way. 2020 helped us slow down a great deal, spend more time with our families, our partners, our pets, more time that we spent connecting intentionally. We are reminded with this scripture today to slow down, try to take our time with this gift of life and the people around us, and pay attention. When we don't slow down, there is so much beauty that we miss, so many people that we overlook or don't pay attention to. This story reminds us, always be aware of those prejudices that we hold. And often, we hold these without realizing it, and that's when the harm can be caused. The truth is, we all hold the capability to be prejudiced with every interaction we face. It doesn't make us bad people. It's part of our biology, but it's our job and our duty to be aware of it and to correct ourselves. Again, it requires slowing down. And this story reminds us to be curious, not furious. Like Mary and Joseph, sometimes we are called to be patient in a time of misunderstanding. And these rabbis and teachers, who I am sure had plenty to do that day, Jesus draws them into a posture of listening and slowing down instead of being irritated at Jesus for interrupting their rituals or their day. As we begin a new year, we may dread the message, slow down. Perhaps you're sick of slowing down and you just want life to get back to its normal pace. But Jesus teaches us, as a 12-year-old, how valuable it is to take our time. Take the time to notice the brilliant theologian right in front of you. Take the time to notice the beauty that is in your life. Take the time to notice when we may be judging someone harshly. It can truly make all the difference in the world. Thank you for listening to my meditation this evening. You may have felt a little rushed because I was using a teleprompter for the first time. But I assure you, my message tonight is to take your time with life. As much as we want to really hurry it up with things, as much as we want life to get back to its frenetic 2019 pace, maybe it's good that things are still slow right now. Maybe during this time we will notice this brilliant little theologian talking in the temple. You never know what you might miss when we are rushed. I hope you're having a good evening. Thank you for listening.